MS Estonia, September 28, 1994. The overnight ferry left Tallinn, Estonia, bound for Stockholm. 989 people on board. The weather was rough but not alarming. The Baltic in autumn. Nothing the ship had not seen before. Just after midnight, passengers heard a loud metallic bang from the bow. Nobody on the bridge reacted. A few minutes later, a second bang. Then the ship began to tilt. What happened next took 50 minutes. The bow visor, like the 50-ton hinge door that sealed the front of the ferry, had torn off its locking mechanisms under wave pressure. It fell away into the sea. The ramp behind it was now exposed to open ocean. Water flooded the car deck at an estimated 1,000 cubic meters per minute. A car deck has no internal walls, nothing to slow it down. The ship listed to starboard so sharply that passengers were thrown against walls and ceilings in total darkness. Power had already failed. There was no order to abandon ship for 90 minutes after impact. The crew had not raised the alarm. The lifeboats were on a ship now listing at 90 degrees, impossible to reach. Of the roughly 160 people who made it to floating debris, 20 died of hypothermia before rescue helicopters arrived. Water temperature that night, 10 degrees Celsius. Of 989 people on board, 137 survived. 852 drowned or froze. Investigators found that the bow visor's locks had been undersized since the ship was built in 1980. The construction process had not classified it as a critical safety component. No inspection had ever checked it properly. A senior maritime investigator later described the design, on the record, as a disaster waiting to happen. It had been waiting 14 years. SS Eastland, July 24, 1915. Downtown Chicago. The Western Electric Company had chartered 5 boats to take workers across Lake Michigan to a company picnic. 844 people died. Not in the ocean. Not in a storm. The ship never left the dock. At 7:18 in the morning, 2,573 passengers crowded aboard as it sat tied to the wharf on the Chicago River. The water there was 20 feet deep. Elevated trains ran overhead. Office workers could see the ship from their windows. The Eastland had been known for years as unstable. Sailors called it the hoodoo boat. It had nearly capsized twice before. Its own management bought it in 1914, having done almost no inspection. One company official testified under oath, "I didn't know much about the boat except that we got it at a bargain. All I do is sign blank checks." As the crowd shifted to one side to watch the departure, the ship began to lean. The crew opened ballast tanks. Nothing corrected. At 7:28 a.m., the Eastland lurched to port and rolled onto its side into the river. Hundreds were trapped below decks. Others were pinned under the hull. Final count: 844 dead, including 290 children. 22 entire families were erased. Here is the detail that makes it worse. The Eastland was carrying more lifeboats than it had ever carried. Congress had passed a new law after the Titanic requiring ships to carry lifeboats for everyone on board. The Eastland complied. The extra lifeboats went on the upper deck. Their weight made the already top-heavy ship more unstable. A Senate Commerce Committee advisor had warned this exact outcome would happen to Great Lakes vessels before the bill was signed. Nobody listened. The safety law written after the Titanic killed 844 people in a Chicago river in 20 feet of water. MTS Oceanos, August 3, 1991. The Oceanos left East London, South Africa, bound for Durban. The ship was old and poorly maintained. The sail-away party was moved indoors because of the weather. By dinner, plates were sliding off tables. At 9:30 p.m., the engine room flooded. Power cut out. The ship went dark. Captain Giannis Avranis was informed that flooding could not be stopped. Nobody closed the lower deck portholes. No alarm was raised. No announcement was made. Avranis and his officers quietly made their way to the lifeboats and left. The bridge was abandoned. A guitarist named Moss Hills noticed the crew moving in a direction nobody else was moving. He went to the bridge and found it empty. He sat down at the radio and called a distress signal until another ship answered. He had no maritime training. He was a cruise entertainer from Zimbabwe. Hills then went looking for the captain. He found Avranas alone on the fantail in the dark, smoking. Avranas said he was not necessary. When rescue helicopters arrived, Avranas boarded one of the first ones. He later called from shore to ask how things were going. Hills and his wife Tracy stayed on the sinking ship and organized the evacuation. Fellow entertainers loaded lifeboats and directed the airlift as the deck tilted beneath them. Hills was among the last 12 people off. All 571 passengers and crew survived. The Oceano sank 45 minutes after the final person was airlifted. The captain was convicted of negligence. He received no prison time. His company gave him command of a ferry until he retired. Costa Concordia, January 13th, 2012. The Costa Concordia left Civitavecchia, Italy, on a 7-night cruise. On the bridge with Captain Francesco Schettino was a Moldovan dancer with whom he was having an affair, traveling as a non-paying passenger. At 9:45 p.m., Schettino steered the 114,000-ton ship toward the island of Giglio for a sail-past salute, a show for passengers and island residents. He brought the ship within 800 meters of the shore. A reef tore a 53-meter gash in the hull. The ship lost propulsion and power and began to list. Schettino told the Coast Guard there was only a blackout. An order to evacuate was not given until more than an hour after impact. International maritime law requires full evacuation within 30 minutes of an abandoned ship order. The evacuation of the Costa Concordia took over 6 hours. Schettino left the bridge at 11:20 p.m. and abandoned ship. 300 passengers were still on board. Coast Guard Commander Gregorio De Falco reached him by radio in the lifeboat and ordered him to return. Schettino refused. De Falco ordered again. Schettino refused again. The conversation was recorded and broadcast around the world. Schettino later said he had not abandoned ship. He had fallen into the lifeboat accidentally. 32 people died. Chloe Weigand, July 7th, 2019. The Freedom of the Seas was docked in San Juan, Puerto Rico. An 18-month-old named Chloe Weigand was in the children's water play area on deck 11 with her grandfather Salvatore Anello. Chloe walked to what looked like a floor-to-ceiling wall of fixed glass. Anello followed her. She asked to be lifted up. At her brother's hockey game, she always banged on the glass. He picked her up and held her toward the window. One of the middle panes was open. It was the only one open. There was no screen. No guard. No warning. A wooden rail 18 inches from the glass made it impossible to tell from where Anello was standing, whether any pane was closed or not. Chloe slipped through his hands. She fell 150 feet to the pier below. Industry standards for passenger vessel windows required fall prevention devices. Other cruise lines had installed them. The Freedom of the Seas had not. A former Royal Caribbean security officer later testified the company had been aware the open windows presented a fall hazard. Anello pled guilty to negligent homicide. 3 years probation. He said he did not know the window was open. He said he thought there was glass. Carnival Triumph, February 10th, 2013. Nobody died on the Carnival Triumph. This story belongs here anyway. An engine fire knocked out power 150 miles from the Mexican coast with 4,229 people on board. The ship lost propulsion, sewage systems, running water, and air conditioning. It drifted for 5 days. Raw sewage ran in streams down hallways and pooled on lower decks. Passengers slept on the open deck to escape the smell. The gift shop sold out every item of clothing within hours. People rationed crackers and onion sandwiches. Crew members rigged ropes to operate lifeboats manually. Carnival sent a supply boat with food and water. It ran out of fuel and had to be rescued. When the ship finally docked in Mobile, Alabama, passengers walked off in as state witnesses compared to survivors of a disaster. Carnival offered each passenger a full refund, a $500 credit toward a future cruise, and reimbursement for travel expenses. Thousands of people redeemed the credit. A cruise ship is designed to feel like a sealed world where nothing can go wrong. That feeling is the product. The engineering underneath it is a single vessel in open ocean with a single captain, subject to whatever laws apply in the waters it happens to be crossing at the moment. Something fails. The water outside looks exactly the same whether the door at the front of the ship is locked or not.